At this point, we know a man was arrested, 3 injured. What other information can you give us?
Well, you do have the information then that of the number of individuals arrested. So let me just kind of start from the beginning, if that might make more sense, then we can get into that. So around 5:30 yesterday evening, as the parade was beginning, or the setting up of the parade and all of the people arriving was, I think the parade was going to begin at 6. There was a report of an incident, 21st and H, involving a vehicle and some injured pedestrians. As we responded to there, we found some injured people, severely or seriously injured. They were taken to the hospital. An arrest was made of a driver involved in that incident. The investigation revealed at this point that this was an alcohol-related collision involving a single driver and 3 pedestrians who were there for the parade last night.
Do you have any update when it comes to people injured, any status on their injuries?
The last information that I had is that they were still hospitalized in stable condition, but had a variety of skeletal and fracture type injuries, serious injuries.
So now let's move on also to the suspect. So one person was arrested last night. Who is that person, to start off?
His name has been released. I don't recall exactly what his name is, but that was released already this morning.
And so we started hearing rumors that it could be an off-duty police officer. Can you confirm or deny that?
It is not.
And one big thing that we heard from multiple people, that they reported this man earlier in the evening for acting suspicious or acting drunk. So do you have any info on that?
Yeah, I can confirm that we did have some sort of a call for service prior to this collision taking place. We're still trying to determine or confirm whether or not it was specifically related to this individual.
Yeah, and so there was also a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation, especially when it came to if the parade was going to continue to go on or if it was rerouted or canceled altogether. So can you go into the decision making behind that and if the parade was going to continue?
Yeah, well, let's back up just a little bit. As this incident occurred, there was a lot of confusion about what had taken place. And a lot of people and a lot of information, inaccurate information, was being spread very quickly, involving that there were multiple fatalities, that there were children lying in the roadway, that there had been a shooting and that sort of thing. And none of that occurred, thankfully. But there was a lot of information. And that's not uncommon in this kind of an event, where you have a large crowd in an open area and something very unusual occurs, something very traumatic. It's easy to become disoriented, and you start hearing all of these different sounds and you start making assumptions. And so, rightfully so, people were spreading information about it. The problem was that it was all inaccurate, or the vast majority of it was. So as we responded to the event, ensured that the victims were, the injured people were treated and taken to the hospital, and began our investigation, over the next half hour or so, we continued to gather facts about what this incident was. Because if a decision was going to be made, we wanted to make sure that all of the factual, all the information that could be known, was known about that. The Bakersfield Parade is not a police department event. It is not a City of Bakersfield event. It's a private organization that was the organizers. And so as it became clear about what the facts were of this particular incident, we shared that with them. And I met with them in particular, the organizer, and shared the information that we had and what facts we knew at that moment. And that being that this appears to be an isolated event involving perhaps an alcohol-related collision, with certainly seriously injuring some people. But there was not a broader public safety threat. It was not part of a larger incident. It was not a random event where somebody was intentionally ramming into the crowd, although that is something that we're still investigating, but at this point there's no information to believe that. And so we were working with them, sharing information with them, and ultimately I shared with them that based on what we knew, the facts at the time, that there was not a public safety threat, or that the public at large would be in danger by continuing the parade, and that was a decision that ultimately they made.
And all of that being said, I know despite all of that, a lot of people were upset that the parade continued, especially with the injuries that happened from this event. So what would you say to people right now that are upset?
Yeah, and I understand that. And I assure you, it was not an easy decision. I'm quite sure that was difficult for them to make. None of us that were dealing with that immediate incident were callous or dismissive of what occurred. we took very seriously the fact that this incident occurred and that people were seriously injured and what the impact that might have to them and the people around them. And so there was some discussion about that, but again, we wanted to make sure that all the facts were known, that there wasn't fatalities. Thankfully, still a very serious incident. And the parade organizers as well were very concerned with that as well, making sure that the people that were injured were treated and were receiving the proper care, and that everyone along the route would be safe if it continued. And so they were sensitive to that, but again, a very difficult decision. There were thousands of people downtown last night, and so ultimately they made the decision to move on, but I certainly understand people's feelings about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And another just like kind of nuts and bolts part of this, so his truck was parked in the alleyway by the Fox Theater, and I know that whole area gets closed off. So do you guys know how his car ended up being there?
I don't know how his car, or how long it had been there, or if it was on site before the setup had begun or the road closures had begun. Those will all be elements that we'll learn in part of the investigation, but I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. I had a quick question regarding the suspect. You can look at her when you respond.
Okay.
Was there a field sobriety test taken at the time of the arrest, and do we know the alcohol level?
I don't know if the field sobriety tests were done. I've seen some video this morning of him being taken into custody and put into a police car, but I don't know exactly what they did in the field. And certainly don't have any test results or alcohol-related test results at this point.
And what would you say to people who quickly get onto social media and start spreading rumors of things that haven't possibly happened, like you were saying at the beginning, gunshots, 12 people run over, all these different things. So what would you say to people who are kind of giving into that?
Well, it's very difficult for when something like this occurs, information spreads so rapidly, and it takes us time to understand what had occurred and really identify what facts are. And by then, a lot of information has been spread, and the vast majority of it is just inaccurate. So what I would tell people is certainly, like we've encouraged people in a variety of things, if you see something, say something, report what you see, take videos and those kinds of things. But be sensitive and be cognizant of what it is that you're saying. Are you making a statement about something occurring? Are you relaying information? Those things are vastly different. And because much of the posts are posted as though somebody witnessed an actual event, such as the fatalities or a shooting, and that didn't occur. And so the public at large, my message is really, when those kinds of things occur, go to trusted sources of information. Come to the police department's website or law enforcement, wherever you are, because we're going to be working to get information, factual, accurate information out as quickly as possible. Go to local media, social media sites, because we're working with local media to communicate with them and spread that information as well. So be cautious and careful in what you're posting. Relaying information about what you saw or what you were told is one thing, but making statements about something occurring can be very dangerous because it does spread quite rapidly. Fear and chaos, and a lot of people can be injured when when that kind of thing is happening, particularly in a large crowd.
And so going off of that, what is the decision making behind, like I know there was no press conference last night, and so getting the information out for people who are potentially fleeing or really scared or don't know what's going on, because this was getting national attention and all of the big leaders were kind of there at the parade. So what goes behind the decision making of what you released and what you didn't for this incident?
Yeah, so we were getting ready for the parade to start shortly before, or right at the time that this incident occurred. So we're trying to gather information as quickly as possible. If you were downtown last night, you saw it was extremely chaotic because we had to move people, we had to move a lot of vehicles just to get ambulances into the scene. So we were doing a lot of those immediate, urgent, emergency type things, making sure that the scene could be secured, making sure that the victims could be safely evacuated and taken to the hospital, and again, make sure that we could restore some calm to the immediate chaos and make sure that we could secure the scene. All of this was occurring while we were aware of the incident and began trying to gather factual information, and it just took some time for us to do that. We are very sensitive and work very hard to put information out as quickly as we can, so both of those things were occurring. You had an ongoing emergency that we were trying to learn about what the facts were so that we could share the information with the public. But all of those things were going on simultaneously, and we put information out as quickly as we could.
I got a question on that. So it took us a couple of hours for a formal press release to be written, and you did address that there were misinformation as gunshots, children being hurt. Why not get in front of the media at not immediately following, but maybe, you know, an hour or two when the situation's kind of tame, the crime scene's kind of tame, why not go in front of cameras to address the public and put those rumors to rest rather than waiting for a couple of hours after the incident and leave it up to just a piece of paper essentially for us to broadcast at our normal airtime? Right now, why not get in front of camera, in front of a live camera, and address it right there?
Who do you want me to look at? Okay, I wasn't sure. That's a very good question, and a reasonable one, and one that we're asking as well is, what did we have in place in terms of resources? We had a lot of resources out there to respond to an emergency, but when an emergency like this occurs, it is also critical that we respond very quickly in sharing and spreading information, accurate information, as we just discussed, on the importance of that. And so that is one of the things that we're looking at is, could we have and should we have more quickly and urgently provided factual information as it was coming in. And so that is certainly something that we're trying to learn from, and we will learn from, but that is part of the conversation that we're having today.
Absolutely. And just real quick, going back to the suspect, do you know what charges he's facing?
I don't know specifically, but it is DUI, felony DUI related charges.
Do you guys have any other questions?
You had mentioned, I had asked about the field sobriety test being taken and not being sure. So how is it confirmed that it was a DUI situation? We can look at her again.
Well, when these kinds of investigations occur, there's some objective symptoms that very often are very obvious or give you some indication that someone has consumed alcohol. There are some preliminary tests that officers do in the field as well. I'm not sure exactly what scope and what span of tests were done so that we would have a result, but clearly there was enough information, objective information, that the officers learned during the investigation to believe that he was under the influence when the accident occurred or collision occurred.
And this is a fluff question a little bit, but what would you say to people when you look at the situation as a DUI? What would you say to people who have or consider or in the moment drive drunk?
Well, it seems like we cannot go through a holiday season without some horrendous, unnecessary, absolutely preventable alcohol-related collision or tragedy. And this occurred last night. Thankfully, there were no fatalities in this particular incident, but we see it in every year, completely unnecessary and absolutely preventable. And so my message would be, this is an indication of what happens when people drive drunk. And so my message is to anyone, we're celebrating in a lot of different ways this year, but absolutely there is no reason to, after you've consumed alcohol, to drive intoxicated or under the influence. There are too many resources in community groups and just a whole host of things that are available for you not to do that. So my message is, do not drink and drive.
I don't know if you have any more.
I'm good.
But do we know if officers were wearing surveillance body cameras at the time, and if that will be released at any point of the investigation?
Officers, you?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, officers were wearing body cameras. I haven't seen any of the footage. I don't know what we've looked at, but they were wearing body cameras.
I think for anything you want to add that we didn't ask?
I don't think so.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Andy, anything? Okay.